I'm back. I took 2 days off because, for no reason, actually. Okay, I don't remember what was happening, but we're on page 438. Trying to find a way, the president summoned LaGuardia. Oh, are we still? Oh my gosh, I remember why I took a break because I was so bored because we were talking in so much depth about this little feud that's happening between New York and Washington because President Franklin Roosevelt hates Robert Moses and wants him taken down from the City Post, which why do you even care? It's in New York City. You're dealing with the whole country, but they're having the feud. So the president summoned LaGuardia to a secret meeting. It was held on February 24th aboard a Pennsylvania Railroad train carrying the president from Washington to a speech in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Although the train stopped in New York, LaGuardia drove to Philadelphia and boarded it there to lessen the possibility that he would be spotted by a reporter. When the train stopped in New York, the city's mayor stayed hidden in a compartment behind lowered window shades. President and mayor were trying to find a way to retreat and still save face, and LaGuardia had brought him I can't talk. I'm back. Sorry, I took a little break. LaGuardia brought with him a draft of a letter he thought might do the job. In the letter, which was addressed to Ix, LaGuardia agreed that he would obey Order Number 129, which means it means not building projects with federal funds if the city's person that's building with the federal funds is somebody that works for the city, and blah, blah, blah. There was another condition that meant that it only applied to Moses and some random other dude who accidentally got caught in the crossfire. Okay, so LaGuardia says he's going to follow that order in the future and would never again appoint a city official to an authority receiving federal funds. But, he said, applying Order Number 129 retroactively to city officials already on authorities created a problem in the case of one particular individual, Housing Authority member Post. Langdon Post. Great name, Langdon. Langdon Post is familiar with the entire city housing program, LaGuardia wrote. What is more, he is enthusiastic, zealous, and energetic in his work. It would be a pity to displace him at this time. Therefore, the mayor said, could I possibly ask for a modification of Order Number 129 that would permit officials of existing commissions or authorities to continue their work until completion? There was also a postscript to the letter. P.S., the mayor wrote, there is one other official who would be affected by the modification. His name is Robert Moses. I assume the ruling on one will be applicable to the other. Wow, that's crazy. So he's just pretending that this is about the random post guy. This is kind of like, I'm trying to think of an example, something this is like, I don't know. The attempts to cover the retreat on Moses by pretending that the battle was really over Post was so transparent that a smokescreen that Roosevelt may have been reluctant to employ it. It was so transparent a smokescreen that Roosevelt might have been reluctant to employ it. He did nothing on February 25, 26, or 27. The requisition slips that Moses had sent to Washington on November 8, almost 4 months before, remained on Ix's desk unsigned. The contracts for the next stages of work on the Triborough Bridge remained unlet. Considerations of revenge and politics appeared to have been balancing themselves almost evenly in the president's mind. But on February 27, something happened that tipped the balance. For weeks, Alfred E. Smith's. Do we know what the E stands for? Now I kind of want to look it up. Al Smith. Sorry, I accidentally Googled the wrong thing. Okay, it stands for Emmanuel. Cool. For weeks, Alfred E. Smith's friends had been urging him to issue a statement on Moses's behalf. Time and again, they had told him that he must delay no longer, that Moses could not hold out without help. But while the old warrior was unhappy now and terribly bitter, He had lost none of his wiliness. Wait, he told his friends, the time wasn't right yet. Moses didn't need him to hold out. The newspaper editorials and civic association resolutions would enable him to do that. Moses needed to win. The moment when he should step in was the moment at which the president and the mayor had been driven to the very edge of a decision to give in to Moses, and that a single push could plunge them over the edge into surrender. If the push was delivered by someone with more influence than a newspaper or a civic association, somebody whose name was still a potent force throughout the United States. A particularly potent as an influence when he's teamed up with LaGuardia. Wow, taking 2 days off, it really has affected my reading, I think. Sorry. Now Smith judged the moment had arrived. On February 26th, he called reporters to his office on the 32nd floor of the Empire State Building and said he wanted to make a statement. As usual, he went right to the heart. Over 10 years ago, he said, Bob was talking to me about a single unified plan for the park and parkway development for the state. He has been carrying out that plan ever since. The Triborough Bridge is the key to success of the whole system. It was ridiculous not to let him finish it. Icke's order was narrow, political, and vindictive. He could not believe, he said, that President Roosevelt would be a party to do it. As Smith had known it would, his statement made the front pages of newspapers across the country on February 27. The very next day, the president, in Icke's words, came to a conclusion that a retreat was in order. Okay, I'm going to check and make sure no one's mad at me for being loud. Okay, nobody's mad. I'm not even being loud, just people are sleeping in. Also, I took a Dunkin' Donuts cup, put in my own coffee, and I don't know, I feel like it tastes better just because of being in here. Summoning Ickes to the White House, he called in stenographer Grace Tully and dictated a draft. We should put a tally, like woman mentioned. So he called in stenographer Grace Tully and dictated a draft of a reply to LaGuardia's letter for Ickes to sign. Ickes, who's friends with the president, well, he works for the president. Ickes' reply agree. Okay, this is a crazy sentence. Ickes' reply. Oh, wait, sorry. Okay, I'm really focusing. Quote, Ickes, ICKS, apostrophe afterwards, so it's possessive, unquote. Ickes' reply agreed to solve the problem created as the result of the expiration date of the term of Commissioner Langdon Post by ruling that Order Number 129 should not apply retroactively, and that therefore, since Post had been appointed to both his city and authority posts before the order was issued, he could keep them. Since a like situation exists with reference to Mr. Moses of the Triborough Bridge Authority, this interpretation shall also apply to him, the letter added. Ickes predated the LaGuardia letter to him February 23 and predated his letter to LaGuardia February 26, so as to antedate by one day the blast let out by Al Smith, he noted in his diary. Regardless of the date at its top, however, the letter was a document of unconditional surrender. Moses' great friend had rendered him one last great service. Okay, so it was actually the president pretending to be Ickes. I understand a little bit more. All but ignoring Langdon Post, the press correctly interpreted the Ickes letter as a personal triumph for the Triborough Bridge Commission. Ickes backs down on Moses, was the Herald Tribune's 3-column lead headline. Its editorial noted that Ickes' letter left some questions about the controversy's origin unanswered, but said, No one, we think, will wish to disturb the grandeur of that handsome, outsized white flag now floating above the offices of the PWA by hurling irrelevant questions at it. LaGuardia's parting growl. As I have insisted all along, relations between Washington and City Hall are most cordial and friendly. There was no need for all this pro bono political business. It was lost in the cheering. So his quote was lost because everyone was cheering. Ix, who hadn't wanted to become involved in the first place, had suffered not only pangs of conscience, but a public humiliation of monumental proportions. Moses did more damage to me than any one person during my years with Roosevelt, he was to write. But even Ix could not forbear to cheer the episode's victor. Reminiscing in a letter to Burlingham years later, he said, "There can be no doubt of the porcupinish disposition of Moses." Well, that's a fun. I'm underlining that. I want to start using porcupinish in my daily life. Okay, so this is still a quote from Ix. He put it all over President Roosevelt and me in that squabble. Cleveland Rogers summed up the dimensions of the triumph when he wrote, "The Battle of the Triborough Bridge was over. Moses won against the most powerful opponent he had ever encountered." And Moses won more than a battle, for in it, as Rogers wrote, he received the most impressive demonstration of public confidence in his career. That was the battle's most significant development. At the conclusion of his gubernatorial campaign, Moses' stock of public confidence had never been lower. But at the conclusion of the Triborough Bridge fight, just 4 months later, it had never been higher. By placing Moses in a position where he was, in fact, the opponent of bureaucrats and politicians that he had for so long claimed to be, Franklin Roosevelt had allowed him to screw his halo back on. That is such a great line because it shows that his halo is fake. And so firmly did Moses screw it back on, without even again making the mistake of running for public office, that in the public's eye, the last of the glow would not fade for almost 30 years. After the Triborough Bridge controversy, Windels was to say, he couldn't do anything that was wrong in the public's eye. If you disagreed with him, why, you were a public enemy. He was back firmly in the saddle. Oh, look at this, you guys. Life is getting so good. I was so sick of that, and I think we're mostly done talking about it because the next chapter is like in 2 flips of the page. So we're coming up. We're coming up on the end of the Ix debacle. If I have to read another diary quote from Ix, I will frown. The ceremony opened the Triborough Bridge. The ceremony opening the Triborough Bridge, held on its central span on July 11, 1936, was to add a tinkling little grace note, an inspiration of pure wit, to the resounding triumph Moses had won 18 months before in forcing Roosevelt and Ix to allow him to complete the project. When the invitations were mailed on May 12, one went to the White House. No reply was immediately forthcoming, and the reasons were certainly understandable. Moses, as master of ceremonies, at the sumptuous opening, would be introducing the dignitaries present, would, in other words, say a few things about each of them. And Roosevelt, familiar with Moses's gift for invective, could hardly have helped worrying what Moses might decide to say about him. A recent incident had provided him with fresh proof of the depth of his foe's animosity. Before the opening of the Christie Forsyth Park complex, LaGuardia, trying to cultivate the president, had suggested naming the park after his mother. Moses had flatly refused. The name Sarah Delano Park had been bestowed only after the mayor outsmarted the park commissioner by suggesting the name publicly. Moses did not dare to publicly oppose a chivalrous gesture to an elderly woman. Wait, that's so... See, okay, this story is so good because I have walked past Sarah Delano Park many times. I had never even really thought long and hard about it. I didn't even realize. I knew that Delano was the name of a president, but I didn't even think about how that was her mom. And I never realized that it was a point of tension and that it was like a bargaining tool, and that the mayor stuck to his guns and that Moses was almost unwilling to do it. That is so funny. That's a great backstory. I hope I think about that every time I go past it. Wait, I need to look up Sarah Delano Park. Yeah, it's like right. It's truly right in the center of everything. It's that little, if you know the park that's like right south of Houston and it has a track and it's like kind of long, yeah. It's like it's like right by Dime Square. Well, not really actually. That was incorrect. It's absolutely not. But sort of. The president had been forced to eat one large slice of humble pie on the Triborough Bridge issue. He was understandably reluctant to be forced to choke down another helping on the bridge's center span. The Triborough Authority's mailroom, alerted to keep an eye out for a response from the White House, reported day after day that none had appeared. They're getting ghosted. On June 23, Ix, although himself piqued because the only invitation he had received was one as a general spectator, quote, it is his fucking diary. It is very small indeed. Naturally, I ought to have a place in the program. Okay, so his position as general spectator advised the president to attend. I understand that there will be a national hookup and the bridge itself will be featured in newspaper articles and pictures throughout the land. If you go to this affair, credit for the building of the bridge will go to your administration where it belongs. Otherwise, Mr. Moses can be depended upon to glorify himself. Unquote. The dedication, free of political overtones in an election year, will be, okay, quote again, will be of more value to you at this time than a score of campaign speeches, the administrator said. He added a piece of encouragement. Mayor LaGuardia told me in New York on Saturday that you are the only one who can take this show away from Robert Moses. And you can do it. He added a warning. You will be in Hyde Park on the 11th. If you are to be near New York on the 11th, won't your failure to take part in the program be subject to misinterpretation? But Roosevelt's response was a memo, only 2 paragraphs long, but quite revealing. I wish very much that I could go to the Triborough Bridge opening on July 11th. It is impossible for me to come down from Hyde Park that day. Incidentally, it would be an all-day trip to New York and back. I really think that if you and LaGuardia take hold of the ceremony, you will so greatly outshine Brother Moses that we will be able to sing, where was Moses when the lights were out? That must be like an allusion to a popular song or something, like where was when the lights went out. I just Googled it and nothing's coming up. But that must be a quote from something. Where was Moses when the lights went out? I don't know. Press speculation over whether the president would attend was mounting, however, and other presidential advisors joined Ix in pointing out that the bridge was the largest PWA project in the East, that it was in the president's own state, that its location in the country's media capital would ensure its dedication nationwide publicity, that credit for it should go to the president's administration, and that the president's absence would arouse press misinterpretation, that he was afraid to confront Moses again. LaGuardia apparently elicited from Moses a promise that he would be on his best behavior. He also elicited a specific promise insisted on by Roosevelt that although Moses would introduce all the other major speakers, he would not introduce the president but would let the mayor do it. The mayor bore the guarantees to Hyde Park and at the last minute was able to announce that the president was coming after all. Ix received a special invitation to be one of the speakers, and at another press conference, LaGuardia announced that the PWA administration was coming too. Parentheses. Leaving the mayor's office after the announcement about Ix, Moses was surrounded by reporters. He declined to answer any of their questions, but could hardly keep from laughing. And he finally said, with a broad grin, "You can say that I'm going to introduce him." I don't really understand what that means. I don't know. Okay, and then another thing in parentheses. In a conference in LaGuardia's office at which Wendell's was present, Moses had shown the mayor the timetable for the program, which limited the president's speaking time to 5 minutes. "Don't be ridiculous," the mayor said. Moses gave the president 6 minutes. He's such an asshole. Their whole feud, like, do you remember? Their feud basically boiled down to Roosevelt, who was a little bit younger than Moses, was also a park guy and was like, "Hey, can I have some money for the parks upstate?" And Moses was like, "No." And then understandably, he didn't take to that very well, and they kind of just like started this like cat fight. This is crazy. Oh, and also Moses didn't like him because like Al Smith was a chiller, like they would drink together, whereas like Roosevelt was always a little bit guarded. Like he kind of like with the vibe. I mean, I always interpreted it as like when you're hanging out with all your friends and then someone shows up who you can tell is a little too good for you. Like they're like too rich or like too fancy or whatever. Yeah, imagine being a park commissioner and having beef with the president and like winning it. Is so crazy. It was extremely okay. Also, I'm almost done with this chapter. Thank God. This was my least favorite one since when we got extreme detail about the Long Island Barons lawsuit with William Macy. That one I thought was very detailed, too detailed for me. Okay, it was extremely hot on the day of the dedication, 97 degrees on the temporary speaker's platform on the bridge center span. And that may have been the reason why 3 of the speakers, Roosevelt, Ix, and LaGuardia, were sweating. But reporters noticed that Moses was strikingly cool in his white suit. He was a gracious host when the president's party arrived, letting his charm wash over Ix in such a great wave that the old curmudgeon, that was capitalized O, capital C, confessed in his diary that he had been overwhelmed. Introducing all the speakers except the president, over a nationwide radio hookup while he looked out at the gleaming white bridge roadway stretching out from Randall's Island toward the 3 boroughs that joined together, and down at the just completed Triborough Stadium below him. He was expansive and complimentary. And reporters who had hoped for some malice on the center span, a little bloodying of the virgin concrete, were disappointed. Imagine like sitting there and being like, I hope they bloody this virgin concrete. All the speeches were standing open ceremony. All the speeches were standard opening ceremony inconsequentialities. Another great word that I don't think I've heard before. An inconsequentiality. That feels like something that I would make up and I would be like mid-conversation at a party, and when I say that, that's the moment you realize like, oh, like I've had a few too many drinks, haven't I? Like I just said inconsequentiality. But it's a real word, I guess. It was probably an oversight that neither FDR nor Ix mentioned by name the man who had built the project they were dedicating. And Moses never mentioned the president at all, and in his introduction of Ix, was ostensibly let all bygones be bygones, moving the audience to applaud, and the reporters to write that the feud came to a graceful end yesterday when he said, "The Public Works Administrator and I have just met face to face and found that neither one of us has horns, hoofs, or a tail." He said that? He loves animals. Look at this guy. He made the zoo. He's like, oh, you don't have horns, hoofs, or a tail. At this junction, where traffic from all directions meets, where there are no left-handed turns, no head-on collisions, and no side swipes, it's a genuine pleasure to meet the Secretary of the Interior. I trust that this meeting will be the beginning of a real friendship and regard. This is a dumb question, but who was the like 2000s pop star who met the Secretary of the Interior? and said, "I love what you've done with the place." And it was interpreted as like being like earnest. And it was a faux pas. I think it was Jessica Simpson. I think about that occasionally. There was, of course, one somewhat unusual note in Moses' introduction of Ix. There have been times, Moses said, when in contemplating our Washington partner, I have been tempted to go back for inspiration to the letter which Dr. Samuel Johnson wrote to Lord Chesterfield about the. Wait, Jake, look, here's some British people for you. Dr. Samuel Johnson wrote to Lord Chesterfield about the famous dictionary, which the great scholar announced that he had finished with comparatively little assistance. Also, this is a huge moment for me, like the reference book shout out. I have always considered this letter to be one of the finest pieces of polite vituperation in the annals of English literature. But no reporter thought to analyze the letter and see its application to Roosevelt and Ix. Ix even wrote in his diary that he was quite pleased by the introduction. Wait, Samuel Johnson, is he? And I think they're British, are they not? Yeah. Okay, you made me nervous for a second. If the old curmudgeon had attended Yale and had taken Chauncey Brewster Tinker's, that's a person's name. If the old curmudgeon had attended Yale and had taken Chauncey Brewster Tinker's course on Johnson and his circle, his pleasure might have been somewhat diluted. Professor Tinker had delighted in telling his students, including Robert Moses, president of Yale's version of Samuel Johnson's Kit Kat Club, the story behind the scholar's letter. Setting out on the task of compiling his great dictionary, the scholar had appealed for the financial assistance he desperately needed to Lord Chesterfield, who had encouraged him to expect it, but had then rudely rebuffed him. When, however, after 7 years of privation and hardship, the work was completed and acclaimed, Chesterfield had attempted to represent himself as Dr. Johnson's patron and thus had taken some of the credit for it. It was then that Dr. Johnson wrote to him, "It is not a patron, my lord, one who looks with unconcern on a man struggling for life in the water, and when he has reached ground, encumbers him with help." He added, "I hope it is no very cynical asperity to be unwilling that the public should consider me as owning that to a patron which Providence has enabled me to do for myself." And that is the end of chapter 22. At least the ending of the chapter was fun. A little shout out to Samuel Johnson and the early dictionary. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. Look at this. It's getting so close to halfway. I really am just so excited. Last night I watched the movie on Netflix, Anyone But You. It's like a rom-com. It's super dumb, but it surprised me. My expectations were on the floor, and I thought there were a few moments that were delightful and goofy in a way that rom-coms haven't been in a long time. What else is new with me? Literally nothing. It's my friend's birthday, so I'm going to his birthday party tonight. It's trivia themed because he's a champion crossword puzzle solver, and I'm a little nervous because all his friends, I'm sure, are going to be like of high trivia caliber. And so you show up early, you make teams, and then you compete. And I don't even know what the trivia is going to be like, but he's been writing these questions for months, and I'm probably not going to do very well. So hopefully I end up on a team with someone really smart. We'll see. Okay. Goodbye. Have a good rest of your day. Oh, wait. If he read The Secret Diary of Harold Ix, we could stand a couple pages of it. Okay, you're right. I shouldn't be like mean about it, but is it really 2,100 pages? If it was actually 2,100 pages, then I can stop being annoying about having to read like 5 of them. Wow. This changes everything. You're right. This is crazy. Wow. He looks like the type of guy that would write a 2,000-page diary. No wonder this chapter was so long. I really think, if I could barely get through the chapter, that I think that book would really do me in. You know how sometimes you read a book and it, like, makes you hate reading and then you just don't read another book for a couple weeks? That book would probably do it to me. Yeah, me too. I bet if you add but they're on, like they have so many Diary of a Wimpy Kids now. I think they're in the 20s, maybe even 30s. I wonder which has more pages, the entire Diary of a Wimpy Kid franchise or Harold L. Icks. Yeah, he's still in middle school. Okay, I am gonna go. Goodbye.